and gentlemen. It's 7:39. Good morning to you. There's been so much, I was going to say doom and gloom. I don't think it's doom and gloom, but it's sort of chaos, if you like, isn't it? Political chaos. So I just wanted to bring you one thing which was nice and pleasant. And it's a message from Steve. Morning, Steve. He says, please can you wish my wonderful wife, Jane, a happy 40th birthday. She absolutely loves GBNEWS. She has a channel on nearly 24 hours a day. Happy birthday, Jane. And let me tell you, at 40, I wish I could remember being that young, Jane. But there you go. Happy birthday.
Jane.
Happy birthday, Jane.
That was worth going off script for. That's nice.
Yes, it was. A bit of nicety this morning.
Anyway, let's get back now. I've got my claws.
All right, David Bella's got his claws out. Former Chief Secretary of the Treasurer and broadcaster extraordinaire Liz Kershaw, both here to take us through the papers. Morning once again. David, to the Times and the Boris bandwagon.
Yes, donors in rush to jump on the back of the Boris bandwagon. You see, I think that Boris is in danger of becoming a really big distraction in this election. It was interesting that Michael Howard, friend Michael Howard, I was in chambers with him, God knows how many years ago, but he was last, when he was leader of the Conservative Party, they didn't have to bother to have an election. He was sort of elected by acclamation. And it's quite interesting how scathing he is in the papers about the idea of Boris coming back. Boris will not offer the Tories anything that he couldn't have offered if he'd been bothered when he was in. And it was the fact that Boris could not run a tight ship, Boris was a shambles and so on, and that attracted some people that were really not going to be good advertisements for the Conservative Party that led him to be where he is. And I think this picture of Boris in his running gear suggests that he puts it on for the photo opportunity, but not much evidence from the look that he does too much of it in reality. But it's donors in rush to jump on the back Boris bandwagon. That'd be such a mistake for the Conservative Party. And I wonder whether he'll get to the 100, actually, because the 100 is, as one of the papers again points out, the 100 is, because this is the Times on the same page, they say it's above the comfort zone for
and perhaps that's why it's been done intentionally. But David, wouldn't you say it's what perhaps the people want? I mean, all you have to do is take one look at the newspapers this morning. I mean, Boris Johnson's face is on front of so many of them. One look at our inbox. I mean, it's mainly people saying they want to see Boris Johnson back. I'll just bring you one here from Stephen, who says Boris was never voted out by the people. It was the Conservatives who got rid of him. They said the best chance of turning this debacle around is bringing back Boris, and he will make them win again. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't agree with it. And I think where we have, it's quite interesting. See, the people who are activists, and thank God there are activists who will write in like that and fully entitled to his opinion. But when you actually looked at what the opinion polls were saying at the end of Boris's time in office, I mean, the repudiation of Boris, according to the polls, was massive. And I think this idea somehow that the public can't wait to get Boris back is just a naive illusion in my view.
I mean, I know, Liz, that I think you'd quite like to see Boris back, wouldn't you? But let me throw this at you from Trevor in Peterborough.
Oh, hi, Trevor.
Who says, if Boris Johnson returns as Prime Minister, I and millions of others of Tory voters will vote Labour.
Ooh, that's a threat. That's very dangerous. Well,
what's the answer to that? Come on, answer.
Well, I think, Trevor, what I have been trying to say today is Boris isn't really intent on coming back. That's the point I was making earlier. He's simply stirring it up.
That's right.
And trying to make sure that there is some democracy introduced into the decision on who is our next Prime Minister. You know, David said earlier there are only 160,000 members of the Conservative Party who choose a leader. That's 159,350 more than there are MPs, 650 them. So I think it's more democratic that the members choose, not the parliamentary party. But I think in all of this, Boris Johnson, I'm not here as his agent or his cheerleader. I just like to deal in facts. And Boris Johnson became Prime Minister in December 2019. And 3 months later, the world was plunged into a situation absolutely unprecedented. Even not even different from the 1918-19
Are you
Asian
talking about the COVID?
Yeah.
But you see,
And so we weren't the only country to introduce lockdowns. I was talking about this when I've been in Europe this summer with people who experienced it differently. In Spain, it was much harsher. You know, in France, it was much more bureaucratic. You had to fill in 2 sides of A4 to go out and buy a baguette. So we all went through that. But anyway, he had to deal with that, and then immediately on the back. We'll come on to this in a minute.
The deal is, he didn't deal with it, did he? What he did was set up a sort of Chicago-style 1920s speakeasy in the gardens of Number 10 while they were back drinking. Oh yes, have I referred yet to cheap Spanish wine?
Oh God, we've had messages.
No, I've had messages saying,
cheap.
Liz, have you found out what label the wine was? Well, no, but I'm guessing it might be
but the point
Casa
is,
de
you
Diablo is
you
my
can't
favourite.
have people dying in hospital without their relatives being able to be close to them and see this kind of going on at Number 10. But this was partly because Boris does not have the seriousness of purpose to be able to take the country through that kind of crisis, and he didn't.
I don't give I've said it before, and I'm a bit blue in the face about this. I don't give a fig that they had a glass of whatever label wine it was at the end of the day. You know, I must be...
Where you were going with that.
I must be abnormal because I'm very angry about my mum dying in a care home and on her own. But I don't blame it on people who are working hard, out, you know, long hours every day.
Making laws they wouldn't keep themselves.
They weren't going to a pub. They were sitting in the open space, which was part of their working environment.
You know.
Well, anyway,
this was all about cheap.
Yeah, I think it's a red herring, and I think it was used by the media and other people with a vested interest to unseat a democratically elected prime minister. Can I just quickly say, I voted Conservative in 2010 for the first time. What did I get? I got the Liberal Democrats in coalition, and I've got high tuition fees for university, which we were promised wouldn't happen, just as my son was going to university. I voted in 2015 Conservative. David Cameron got in, and then he resigned as soon as it didn't go his way in a referendum. Then I watched as Theresa May was elected, and then I thought, I'm going to pay 25 quid and join the Conservative Party so I can become one of the 200,000 and have a say in who's the Prime Minister. And then I voted for Boris Johnson. He got booted out. Then I voted for Liz Truss. She got booted out. I just feel quite anarchistic about this now.
Can I tell you,
democracy.
I think all of the candidates for this election should ring you up and say, please don't back us.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Can I just say that? You know, it's really
You're
sad.
obviously, bad news for whoever you support.
It was great to be called Elizabeth a couple of months ago. Then the dear Queen died. Now Liz Truss has got kicked out. I'm a bit worried for myself.
This is your last show, Liz. Can we have a look at financial chaos in
Yes.
Take us around the world, Liz.
Yeah, I tweeted this week just some facts about what's going on in the rest of the world, because what's been missing from the coverage of Liz Truss's short time in office has been the situation globally, and she's been given the boot and a lot because the people have reported on what she's doing and blamed her for everything without any context, and it's really been annoying me. I think it's insulting to the public that the media don't give us the big picture, and I think it's lazy of people not to seek it out for themselves. If, you know, in France, well, just to stick to the papers for now, Financial Times, which is always it's like boring, but it's a good barometer of what's going on in the world, because it's money that rules the world. It's not our politicians, it's the bankers and the global corporations. Anyway, Turkey it was said the other day, it's the best place to go for your holidays now, because you'll get a best exchange rate. Turkey's cutting its interest rates. It's going against the flow. Erdogan believes it's best to cut interest rates. The inflation there is 87%, but it's cutting interest rates. He believes in a growth policy. Does this sound familiar? He's seeking to prioritise growth. in the run-up to the elections in June. The President believes that low interest rates will play well with small businesses and construction firms, which are his political base and who rely on cheap credit. So that's of interest. Also in the papers today around the world, in the Financial Times, the yen slides to its lowest level since 1990. That's because of what's happening with American
with the dollar
rates. European pension funds are now scrambling around for help from the Central European Bank because they're facing the same problems with gilts and everything that we did in the UK a couple of weeks ago. And just a couple of other things on this topic, because we don't live in a vacuum. I tweeted some of this the other day and somebody put, oh, that's nothing to do with us, it's in other countries. Oh, get real. So in France, for example, Macron's had to force through his new budget undemocratically because he hasn't got a majority in Parliament, so he just bypassed them. And he's trying to raise the pension age. There's rioting on the streets in Paris, teachers are on strike, refineries are on strike, trains are on strike, and some of the things, they've turned off all the hot water in public buildings in France. So you can't, if you go to the lavatory in the Parliament building, you know, they've turned off the Eiffel Tower lights earlier at night. In Germany, crematoria have been asked to turn off, you know, at night, and they say, no, we can't do that, it has to be kept at 800 degrees all the time. There are so many problems around the world, financial, with fuel, social, and none of this has really been reported.
No. Well, no, it does. It all gets bogged down in what's happening over here. Just quickly, David, Fraser Nelson has written a piece in the Telegraph. He thinks that things could all go well for the Tories eventually.
Yes, I mean, the worry is, as I've always said about 1992, that when the Tories lost the confidence of the electorate early on in that Parliament over their ability to handle the economy, they then had nearly 5 years of running an economy well, but it didn't do them any good. They still lost more than half their seats. Fraser Nelson reviews the three most likely outcomes, which would obviously be a return of Boris, which would obviously be Penny Mordaunt, or would obviously be the one that I think he most favours, Rishi Sunak. And basically what he says is all are more viable than Liz Truss's shambolic attempt at the premiership, for which the Conservatives may not quickly be forgiven. But if they get it right this time, then it's possible just to see a Tory route to recovery. I was thinking about that actually as I was coming in, and one thing he didn't mention, which he could have done, because, you know, I lived through that 92, 97 Parliament, lost my seat at the end of it. Blair was incredibly popular then. Blair was seen as a man who transcended party politics, and he had charm, and you know, it didn't last. These things never do, but at that time he was a man of the moment. The point has to be made that Labour don't have anyone like Blair, and therefore, you know, it's a bit like someone said about Ronald Reagan. You know, you could walk through his deepest thoughts and not get your feet wet. Well, the same is true of Labour's popularity. It's a mile wide but an inch thick, and there's no evidence that the current Labour leadership have any ability to build the kind of depth of support that Blair had. So just to be a bit optimistic for those remaining Tories who are watching us.
Well, yes, you never know. You never wish you have
Can we just
we're not out of time, Liz.
I'll save it then for cat
You're going to be thrown out.
Save it for next time.
I've had enough of you, Liz. I'm sorry.
Liz, David, thank you both very much indeed.